So when they are moved from the AP to the
Like in their, from second year to third year, students from the AP group were, 5 of them were moved to the GP group.
yeah.
So then, does that number 10 in the third year, or GP, does that include the AP kids?
I don't think it does. This is
Okay.
just from the original GP
Okay.
group.
Got it.
Okay, so this is just a way of showing movement or within the groups and between groups. Okay. This is the first one where we look at outcome. So time here, intake, year 1, year 2, year 3. Same thing over here. Intake, year 1, year 2, year 3. And then what you need to know also is that one dot here is one child. So this means that up this line here are all the children at intake in the IBT group, AP group, and same thing over here, GP group, intake. And this line here is for their normal range. So that is just to show where 85, that's what they have as a cutoff for the normal range. So at intake, the groups look quite similar. Most of the children scoring beneath the normal range in all the groups. And then after 1 year of intervention here, you see there is quite a movement in the IBT group, not so much of a movement in the other 2 groups, and then it sort of plateaus out for the IBT group above the normal range, and these groups stay roughly the same across the years. This down here is just the average, so here they have collapsed GP and AP group into one group, which is just called eclectic.
I think it's interesting that any of the kids in the AP or GP moved up, and I feel like those are the cases that are kind of clinged to as the norm rather than the exception when we go to we see kids progress.
Right.
You saw one. And that might be a variable, might be simply
Development.
parental
Or
involvement or
No, even a misdiagnosis.
Misdiagnosis,
Some kids are
yeah.
just, that they stick, artistic tendencies on them,
Right.
and
Yeah.
really, they just were a little bit behind, and needed a minute to catch up.
I think it's really interesting that the first year climb is so sharp for the IBT group, but they all 3 groups kind of have this like leveling maintenance kind of phenomenon going on. Like it's that I would have expected the eclectic group to have either like a dip if there was a leveling in the IBT, or I would have expected more of a climb.
I feel like we see that a lot in our treatment though too, where the initial gains come quickly and then
Yeah. So that's an interesting whole discussion
Yeah.
right there. It's like, why is that like that peak and then kind of just
Yeah.
flat?
I mean,
Ish.
your IQ is pretty stable over time, and so I think that once they sort of reach their, maximum potential, it probably
Yeah.
stabilize.
It doesn't mean they're not learning. They're
Right,
maintaining, they're
exactly.
learning and
Yeah.
keeping up with the
Yeah.
age
Yeah,
changes.
I think
Yeah.
that's the point too, is that, it's not necessarily that they've peaked out, is that, well, now they're just progressing, as a typically did.
typical rate.
Yeah, if they're in the normal range. Because I think that's something we run into in our programming, where we almost start pushing our kids farther than they should be,
Right.
because we get excited, and then, we're like, oh, and then sometimes I have somebody like, well, wait, does a typical 5-year-old know that preposition? Like, am I over teaching? And so, just because they're progressing as a typical kid doesn't mean they're not progressing.
Yeah, I think also it's if you compare it to like if you are practicing to run fast, to sprint. If you practice the first year, you probably see a lot more, let's say, in the reduction in your time on a 100 meters sprint. But if you wanted to improve your time from, let's say, 10:2 to 10:1, that would require just exponentially a lot more training than it would to increase your timing from, or reduce your time from 11 to 10.2, say. You see what I mean?
Right.
I think you can see something similar with IQ. IQ is not it does not go on forever. I mean, where you have if you have reached 100, it's much more difficult to have a gain from 100 to 130 than from 70 to 100, because the skills involved are just so much more complicated, and probably again would require exponentially a lot more hours to teach, probably.
And I get why they're using IQ, but I think for our purposes it would be better to see like skills acquired. You know, what does that look like for the AP and the GP group versus our group? Are the GP and the normal
They have
range
other, they
still?
have communication,
Yeah.
self-help.
Yeah,
and
this is
short.
the
Yeah, they have lots.
I have it for all of these. So this
Okay.
is just the communication, which is similar.
Yeah.
Similar pattern basically on all of these. This is self-help. This is the social.
Oh, wow.
That's somewhat different. Where you have on the social, you have also a similar increase for year 2. I guess that could be. Social skills are more complicated and require more hours, more time to teach. That might be an explanation for that.
More prerequisites before you're
More
getting into that.
prerequisites, exactly. Yeah.
There's also this misconception in the classrooms that just exposure is going to increase. I had a teacher tell me that. They said, yeah, I just want him to sit next to him, and you know, I think that'll help him open up more. I thought,
Lady, look at this graph.
yeah, yeah.
Bring the graph.
Bring the graph.
I will.
This is the composite, just the average from
Wow.
9 months.
I have a question about the participants. Do you know if all 3 groups receive an equal amount of treatment in each setting? Because for some reason I'm assuming that the IBT group had like more weighted treatment in the home environment than maybe the other 2.
Oh, the other 2 are classroom settings.
Yeah, they do. They did.
They did have more.
They did have more.
Right. Because it
Yeah.
includes home, but across.
But the other ones didn't have home.
They didn't have home at all.
Okay.
No.
So
It's just classroom.
not
But that is
founding
kind
variable.
of, but it's also, that's typical, like that's,
Yeah.
that's kind of also saying, okay,
Part of
if you're only gonna do work at school,
Right.
because this is what we're pitching you this ABA classroom. Like that, to me, that's actually really clinical and realistic. If they gave them the same stuff at home, I don't think that would be an accurate portrayal of what GP and AP is. That doesn't really, you know.
So they did for sure control for that, like none of these kids that were in the GP or AP classrooms didn't on their own have some.
They, in the 2005 study, they talked a little bit about that, and they talked about how they couldn't control for all of those
Right, that's what I was
variables,
thinking.
and that it's potentially possible, it was listed in their discussion, it's potentially
That's right.
possible,
Yeah.
but that from parent report, there wasn't any substantial services being
Got it,
provided.
okay.
Yeah, that's right.
They
Um,
did say that the AP group, they said that their level was comparable to the IBT, the intensity of intervention, even though it was 25 to 30 versus 30 to 40, I think.
But again, it's like Ellen was saying, that setting.
Yeah, but in terms of the question about the hours, if you look at just the hours of intervention, yeah, the IBT was 35 to 40, sorry. And then the AP was 25 to 30 and the GP was 15 to 17. So there was a decrease in hours, although the researchers felt that the AP level was comparable to the IBT, even though it was less.
Was it over 25?
I guess that was actually one of the questions Miriam sent me was, how is that comparable? So I don't know if we have an answer for that, but that was one of the things that jumped out at her as well.
Yeah,
It's a good question.
it is.
We don't have an answer, but it's a good question.
Okay, moving on. This is, I think one of the main things from this paper is just various ways, the various novel ways that they are displaying their data, which is, they are a bit heavy to read to begin with, but once you spend a little time with them, I found them very informative. So this here, let me see if I can understand this again. So again, we have a line here, which is the normal range. And here again, they have collapsed the AP and the GP group into the eclectic group. So if you start with this, cognitive, standard scores, IQ, we have this gray area would be the percentage scoring below 85, and this small on top here would be the percentage above 85. So we see both groups are similar at intake. And then we move to the 1 year, and we see proportions above the normal, or within the normal range have increased a lot for the IBT group, not so much for the eclectic group. And then it's basically the same pattern in year 2 and year 3. So these are just the same type of graphs for communication, self-help, social, composite, and so on. So it's basically the same data we have just looked at, but displayed in another way. We see again that cognitive, non-verbal, communication. These are the areas where the gains are largest, and that gains, at least for the first few years, social skills and the composite are not the changes are not as dramatic as with IQ.
Self-help one is so sad.
It is.
Yeah, not much
I think, yeah.
change.
It's not that surprising though, because like, you know, I think we all run into it when we're trying to work on self-help skills with parents and say, no, really a typical 5-year-old should be able to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, that's not important to me. Like this, I want to work on this other skill, and it's hard to get the focus on that.
Yeah.
I also think too, maybe we were talking about the only place where there wasn't a significant increase was the motor skills.
Yeah.
And I think that we spend a lot less time focusing on motor skills than the school setting does. They're so about OT and
Ball
if
play.
they
AP.
like go across the monkey
Obstacle
bar and like, I
course.
don't
Yeah.
care, I just want to say hi.
Yeah.
One of the reasons for that might be also that they score relatively high to begin with, so it's hard to get that
That's true.
significant increase, and also the other group are they are not so different from the other groups.
Yeah, that's kind of like from special education serving children with all sorts of disabilities, and so like children with physical disabilities, they have that focus, and so then a child with autism comes in, they're like, you can have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's just,
I just feel like our score would be way higher focused on it.
of course, it would be really
Yeah, we have it.
right.
Those
Okay.
kids would be throwing
Pro
balls.
basketball player.
We could make that still high.
Yeah.
So let's look at this one. Not intuitive to me at least, but again we have this line. What I ended up with is to look for a pattern. This here is supposed to be your prompt for how to read a graph. So look for a pattern in the dots above the line. Question is, can you see, so the black circles are the IBT group, squares is generic, and triangles autism programming. The question is, can you see more of the black dots above the line than the circles and squares? If you
Yes.
can do
On
that,
most
that
of
means
them.
IBT is better.
Most of them. Not
On
all of
most
them.
of them, yeah.
Social and cognitive.
Um,
communication.
Oh.
So the gray shade here means that in addition to making a gain of at least 15 points, they also made gains into the normal range. There's a lot of things displayed in the same diagram. Which
This is my favorite one.
I could not imagine creating this graph. It's really.
I like this one.
I don't.
So you want to get in that upper right quadrant.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty significant. Look at all of those kids in the normal range of social. That's so awesome.
normal range social down here, yeah.
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 It is. Especially if you compare it to the triangles and the
Yeah.
squares.
You can see that some of the IBT kids weren't working on self-help skills though, right?
Yeah, and this score also includes a lot of social.
It's also-
I mean self-help.
I mean, they are fairly young when they're starting. The average age is 3, and not that there aren't self-help skills to work on it for a 3-year-old, but I think.
Well, but they were
those are
6
some-
by the end,
Sure.
right?
Maybe they've just been starting.
Okay. One more.
You're right, a lot of parents don't see it down towards
Prompt over here. So this, what this shows is the black is the proportion within the normal range. So if you just look at the bars, you can see that increases from year to year. Not so much for the eclectic group down here. IBT, eclectic. And again, the arrows show movements. And if you have a thick arrow, it means lots of children change, or higher percentage change. And a thinner arrow is fewer children. But so if you look at the change from baseline to year 1, you have an increase from 7 to, what does it say, 43 or something.
41.
41. And then you have additional increase to year 2, and then some more even
I know.
to
And then
Pretty cool.
50.
Yeah.
It's so weird that it's 47 for that.
Yep, yep.
So even though most even though most of the gains are made in year 1, there's still improvement, at least for this variable when you look at year 2 and year 3. Not so for the eclectic group, which is more stable around 15%.
A lot of thick arrows pointing down.
Yeah.
And then the arrow going up gets skinnier and skinnier.
Yeah. Scott, do you remember when we talked to Gina Green in Chicago? She said they were going to publish this study now, but they have been delaying it because their statistician Stanislav, he had been just sitting and playing around with his graphs for forever, and he wanted to get it just right before they could publish it. So
He did a good job.
He did.
they did a fantastic job. So
Yeah.
this is really an example for how to display your data.
Time well spent.
Will they present this at the national conference or international conference?
I don't know. They should. But do you know, Scott? Or no?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Hope they have a really big room if they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fantastic stuff.
This kind of shows you though, like the big push, which I think we kind of all know clinically, but we hold out hope that like if after a year to 2 years they're not in that normal range, they're probably not gonna be.
It would be
Right,
interesting.
because that the 2 to 3
It gets
year
smaller,
is pretty
and I can
small.
only imagine
Yeah.
4, 5, 6,
Yeah.
7 years.
When I was looking at
Yeah.
the first graph with the dots, the cognitive, it would be interesting to see which kids were the actual dots, because even the lowest dot on the IBT still made a lot of gains after the first year. Like if that's the same kid, like that 20 kid, moved all the way up to almost 60. So
Are you talking about this one?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So like if you see the difference between intake in year one
Yeah.
from the lowest kid and then in year
For
one, you
IBT.
know, for
Mm.
IBT.
Like if they could do
They
colored
move-
dots,
you
so
don't
you
know
could
if it's
see
the
like
same
where
kid.
We
yellow
don't know if that's
goes.
the same kid, but
Maybe
you
you
can
can
safely
like it.
assume that that's the same kid. That's a big assumption, but you know, you're pretty
I like
sure
to believe that
that's
kid
the
is
same
the
kid.
second to the top on the
Right, the
list.
130 genius
Yeah.
IQ. So, you know, based on that, you can kind of assume that that's the same kid, and that's still a big jump.
I would love to see that.
Yeah.
That would be
That's
really.
what I was thinking. There's no way to tell, but if you look at the other graphs, all of the kids towards the bottom, if they're the same kid, of course you're assuming, sort of stayed around the bottom.
Right.
And the open holes on that graph represent the dropout kid?
Well,
No.
yeah, they're either they are the kid that either changed group. So this an open circle means that this was a GP kid,
I
on
see.
year
They
three.
Okay.
and the gray ones are the unknowns. So this one here would be unknown. This is change to GP, unknown, change to GP.
So they still had a score for the child, but they just didn't know about the placement specifics. Like they may have switched districts and they didn't fit the description of the
Yeah, that's
placement maybe.
what it appears.
The child wasn't disappeared, but the
Still
placement
not
was
available.
there.
So that's it.
And I just happened to take an inventory of our clients the other day for a survey that I was doing. I had to answer how many children that we serve receive 25 to 40 hours a week versus 15 to 24, 10 to 14, and then under 10. And just looking at the Los Angeles and San Fernando Valley kids, 64% of our clients are receiving 25 to 40 hours a week of treatment, which a few years ago we weren't hitting that high of a percentage. So I was
64%.
really excited to see that 64% of your client base is getting 25 to 40 hours a week. And I think the insurance funding has a lot to do with that and being able to get more intensive treatment.
It's a combination of school and home.
It is a combination, yeah. So I included the school hours, and I thought, well, that would be interesting to further tease that out. But I counted it since we're there. I figured we're providing some